Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Thursday, March 6th, 2025, and today we're going to talk about managing aphids in the greenhouse, rubber band alternatives for bunching stuff, crops to grow this year for, well, next March, and cilantro and lacy phacelia as cut flowers. It's a full day. Let's do it. All right, happy Thursday, everyone. Yesterday was blustery and windy here, so not much going outside. But I was looking at the forecast for next week, and it's looking like t-shirt weather, so that's a welcome sight. We will be able to prep some beds and get a bunch of stuff done that isn't necessarily planting. The onions I will hold on to until the end of the week, and if the forecast looks good, they will go in the ground. If not, I will continue to hold on them. Powder potatoes in the mail, but they will hang out for at least another week before I even try to plant those. The first field carrots will likely get sown by the end of that week, of next week, but again, if the weather looks rough, I may just hold off, because when you see a nice early warm spell, remember, it's mostly a mirage. You can enjoy it, but don't fall for it. Anyway, as is the not quite a tradition of answering 3 questions from Patreon on Thursdays, we will answer 3 Patreon questions today to help us get caught up from all the awesome February questions, because we are getting lots of great March questions already, even though I'm just now realizing I haven't even started the March thread. Maybe getting that done by April would be a good goal. Yeah. Anyway, the first Patreon question of the day comes from Patreon member Joseph Person, who writes, quote, "Hi from Alaska." Oh, Alaska. We don't have a lot of Alaskan growers. That's cool. Love the show and appreciate the effort you put into it. Enjoy the sports and life stuff a lot. When you said your life was just better because you stopped drinking, it resonated with me as something I was pretty sure would be true for myself for a long time now. Have basically cut alcohol consumption down to nothing this year. We'll see. I'll stop there for a second on that. It's been wonderful. I like every day I wake up feeling great, and I'm like, this is weird. I can't believe I went like 30 years without feeling like normal. Anyway, they write, on the packaging stuff, ordering rubber bands for produce, and curious if you use one size for everything. Have you ever tried twist ties or twine? I like the idea of cotton twine, but it seems pretty impractical. Another question, do you have any issues/suggestions with pests on seedlings? I have a large indoor grow area and I continually struggle with aphids. Most of the natural balances are just not present. I do grow a variety of crops in it all winter long and mostly have learned to keep it in check, but it's very hard when I switch over to transplant production in the spring. I don't really have significant issues once transplanted outdoors, more in greenhouse, but the seedlings are obviously very vulnerable, and I feel like heavy aphid pressure early on just makes for much weaker starts than I would prefer. In addition to preventative measures and general best practices, do you think it's worth trying to deal with issues that arise, or is it best to just throw out infested trays of starts? Slow growing things like peppers are the biggest issue. They might be inside for 3 months, and most of my efforts to control aphids also hurt or slow the plants to some extent. End quote. All right, love it. 2 great questions there, Joseph. The first question was about if we use the same rubber band size for everything, and the answer to that is yes. If it's too big, we just double it up. We use the 3.5 by 1/8 inch non-latex number 3 rubber bands from, I think it's from Websteront, I believe is where we order those. And then you asked about twist ties or twine instead of, or perhaps alongside of, for certain crops, rubber bands. Now, a long time ago, Hannah and I tried using untreated twine to wrap bunches, and it took just flat out way too long to make sense. Maybe for a small CSA, but when we were doing the farmer's market, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of bunches. Tying was just not super practical. However, it would be awesome to have some more options like that. And if you're feeling ambitious, there are string and twist tie machines and handheld tools out there that can do that job. I'll link a few in the show notes, but obviously you can just Google string or twist tie machines and research it. Honestly, I've never tried any of them, and I haven't looked in a long time besides a cursory look today, and I'm seeing a lot of new options out there. So it may be worth investigating that more. Certainly environmentally it would be. Listeners or watchers, let us know if there is an affordable option that you have used or that you like. Would be cool to find practical alternatives to rubber bands for sure. I will explore this topic more in the future. Now, to your second question about aphids on seedlings. Boy, oh boy, I know this one well, and it's a topic that is for sure going to make some ears perk up. No matter how good your soil management is in the fields, it won't help a whole lot with your greenhouse aphid issues on seedlings. Lots of growers run into this, at least from time to time, so you are not alone here, Joseph. So if there was an easy answer to aphids, obviously, I would be joyfully giving it, but they really require a multi-pronged approach to handle. First is sanitation. Every fall, clean out the greenhouse area entirely, and especially any plants that have grown up through the fabric or gravel or whatever the floor is made of. And it sounds like maybe you use it for also production, so that may be a little complicated in your particular circumstances. But general, just keeping weeds and stuff down is a good idea just for aesthetics and sanity in a greenhouse. But could also help reduce your aphid populations. Next, and this may be somewhat seem counterintuitive to what I just said, consider growing have some grow bags with like mint and sweet alyssum, maybe some other small flowers, some dill, that sort of stuff. Just any sort of flowers that beneficials love. And that way, if they're in grow bags, you can move them in and out of the greenhouse as needed. Aphid predators such as lacewing and ladybugs need additional fodder, so try to give them some options. Use a good soil mix. If it's out of balance or perhaps too nitrogenous, it could create problems with aphids. Also monitor heavily for aphids all over the greenhouse and address them as soon as you see them. If you wait, the populations will explode. Some ants also farm aphids, so try to keep the habitats around the greenhouse down to a minimum. And I don't know if you are going through the same thing we are here, but we have this new ant. I don't know if it's new. We have this very prevalent ant, and it is everywhere. It will take up residence under a tray that has been on the ground for like 30 seconds. All right, so I'm going to interrupt for a second because I was editing this video and I was like, I bet I can go find one right now, even though it's like 30 degrees outside. I bet I can find one. And I immediately, there it is. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see there is just a bunch of ants right there. Everywhere. It is wild. So that can be a bit of a challenge, just making sure that they don't have habitat to hang out in. You can introduce aphid predators, but one, that comes with some ecological issues of its own, which we will discuss at some point. And two, you have to do that early, preferably before an outbreak. And three, they will also need flowers to survive those introduced predators. Moreover, those predators are not guaranteed to be effective, especially once aphid populations have blossomed. Introducing beneficials is a tool in the toolbox, so to speak, but it can't be your only approach. And again, there may be some reasons to avoid it anyway. There are organically approved biological controls, such as insecticidal soaps, and as long as you stop the populations early, that may at least hold them back. Also, make sure you are not over-fertilizing plants with some sort of nitrogen source like, I don't know, fish hydrolysate or whatever. I find that potting the plants up rather than feeding them directly handles the aphids better, but that is purely anecdotal. And so instead of putting on some sort of nitrogenous amendment, I like just putting them in bigger and bigger containers so that they can kind of outgrow them on their own. Again, purely anecdotal. Taken all together, these tips should help, but there is no one easy solution to aphids, especially with so many different types. They just need many different approaches. Anyway, I hope that gives you some starting points on aphid management. I'm sure you're doing some of that already, but maybe something in there was a missing piece. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, crops for the Hungry Gap. Ooh, that one rhymed. That's fun. Didn't know I was going to do that. It is Thursday, though. BRB.
Hungry, 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 hungry. Boy, where do we start? Hungry, hungry, hungry.
Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Peaceful Heritage Nursery. If you're looking for hardy and resilient fruit trees, berry plants, or pawpaw trees, then check out Peaceful Heritage Nursery. Peaceful Heritage Nursery LLC is a mail-order nursery shipping premium quality fruit trees and berry plants across the USA. They specialize in resilient, non-GMO plant genetics for small growers. Their diverse selection includes berries, cold hardy figs, passion fruits, gumi, mulberry, and much more. They're famous for their diverse selection of premium quality grafted pawpaw trees. 5-star Google ratings and customer testimonials attest to their commitment to excellence in quality and service. Find them at peacefulheritage.com and join the mailing list. Once again, find them at peacefulheritage.com. Use the promo code NOTILL for 10% off your first order. Today's episode is also brought to you by So Right Seeds. So Right Seeds is an heirloom seed company that offers fresh, high-quality, open-pollinated seeds. They have a great selection on their website of over 400 varieties, along with a planter's library with tips for growing. They offer cover crops and bulk packs of seed for sustainable home gardening. The instructions on the back of their packets have all the information you need to get started. Go to So Right Seeds, that's S-O-W, and use my discount code NOTILL for 15% off your order. That's SoRightSeeds.com. All right, enjoy the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's second Patreon question comes from Patreon member Christy Lewis, who writes, quote, "Hey Jesse, loving kicking off my workday in Australia with your new show. Thank you. Wondering what your thoughts are on dried beans as a way of smoothing the season. Our hungry gap can be long at 42 degrees latitude, so they seemed like a way of making spring CSA more interesting, even if they're not super profitable. And if you have suggestions about where to find info on harvesting for food safe storage, that would be great. Thank you." End quote. Awesome, Christy, and always great to hear from our Australian friends. Australia, Alaska, we're getting around today. I know you all are headed into the winters there, so this is probably peak on your brains. Okay, so for those unfamiliar with the term hunger gap or hunger gap, this is usually the period between winter and late spring when food may be growing, but is not quite there yet, when storage crops are either gone or in kind of rough shape, canned goods are heavily depleted. For us in the US, we're in that gap now, and so what ends up happening when it comes to selling food headed into the spring is that it's a bunch of greens, because that's the stuff that grows early. So that's like lettuces, spinach, radish, which is not really a green, but it is kind of a salad crop mostly, plus kale. Maybe you get some green garlic in there, maybe some herbs, but just greens. So what you don't get is many of the bulky starches and proteins like potatoes and sweet potatoes, winter squash, etc. So the beans idea is interesting because unlike something alive, such as potatoes or squash or whatever, or something with a shelf life like canned goods, beans hold up pretty well in just jars or sealed containers. In fact, that same thing could be said for popcorn or milling corns. Grains as well. If you had a way of producing something like barley, wheat, oats, and or rice, that could be an awesome early spring offering. Nuts too, if you have nut trees and you know who does and doesn't in your customer base have nut allergies. Maybe even spices like red pepper flakes, coriander, dried ginger and turmeric, even teas, that sort of stuff. I know herbs are not exactly very caloric, but it could bring something interesting and new to the table in terms of the marketing side of things, provided you are, of course, following all your local processing laws. As for storage, the trick is that every crop has its own storage needs, and they just have to be met. No real way around that one. Grains, for instance, have to be well protected against weevils and rodents. Moisture has to be managed both post-harvest and in storage for things like beans, and etc. There is a relatively new book I recommend on crop storage that I will link in the show notes called Beyond the Root Cellar by Sam Knapp that has a lot of good info about long-term crop storage. For us, just speaking strictly about crop storage, we keep the majority of our storage crops, potatoes, onions, garlic, sweet potatoes, winter squash, in our cooler where over the winter with the thermostat set around 38 degrees, I can basically turn the AC unit / CoolBot unit off all winter and then only run a small heater in there to keep that temperature. Next week, they are calling for the 70s here. So like the low 20s in Celsius. So I would likely have to turn that AC unit back on there. But most of those crops are done now and would not be the most exciting addition to an early CSA, even if they are technically still edible. For us right now, it's just a matter of getting them replanted. So that storage that I just described is not ideal for what you're talking about. And it's definitely not ideal for every crop, but it's a fine compromise that gets us most of the way through the winter for ourselves. If we were selling all that stuff still, we would have to dedicate space for each item to keep them as fresh as possible under their preferred conditions, which would certainly help have something right now. All that said, something like beans, however, are much less finicky as long as they are dried correctly after you harvest them and protected from pests all winter. Anyway, I love that question and keep them coming. I hope I was helpful there. Otherwise, we're going to take another quick break, and when we return, we're going to talk a little bit about getting cut flour out of your cover crop mix. Be right back. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Harnwall Greenhouses. Arnwa Greenhouses has pioneered controlled environment agriculture since 1965, partnering with market gardeners and farmers across North America to deliver turnkey greenhouse solutions. Their unwavering mission is to support growers' success through innovation and expertise in design, manufacturing, and installation. Arnwa Greenhouses are engineered to withstand high wind and snow loads, providing optimal brightness, increased yields, rapid ROI, and long-lasting durability. With over 20,000 projects completed, they are more than a manufacturer. They are a trusted partner. Their structures foster sustainable, energy-efficient ecosystems that drive profitable, resilient agriculture. In 2025, Arnwa is introducing a new low-tech, high-tunnel model starting at just $2 per square foot, offering open field growers an accessible entry into controlled environment agriculture. Learn more at arnwa.com. That's HARNOIS.com. All right, back to the show. All right, our last Patreon question on this Patreon Thursday, which lacks any alliteration, but oh well, that'll work. Anyway, our last Patreon question comes from Patreon member Josh at Walden Ridge Farms, who writes, quote, "Good morning from East Tennessee, Jesse. What is the cut flower potential for lacy phacelia as well as cilantro? They are among your preferred autumn cover crop blend, and the ability to put them into arrangements would be a value-added bonus if the shelf life is there. Thanks for all you do. As someone in the startup phase, this show has been invaluable. I also want to request some content on perennial fruit trees and canes. Please offer plant and soil care, site layout tips and tricks for that garden segment on a seasonal basis, or share some other podcast resources covering fruit more thoroughly. Thanks again," end quote. All right, great stuff, Josh. So, okay, I love lacy phacelia around these parts. I first found out about that particular plant through a webinar with Steve Groff and have been hooked for years on the stuff. It's planted in the late fall/winter and makes a beautiful spring flower that jams away in May. This year, I fear I lost a lot of our phacelia to the hard freezes that we had this winter with no ground cover, like there was no snow on the ground, just lots of ice. So that's the first year it's been a problem, but we'll see. It may still be fine. The stuff that stuff is just really resilient when it's small. You all know I'm not a cut flower grower, so my opinions on flowers come mostly from other people or from Hannah and I having bouquets in the house every day throughout the summer. Cutting a bouquet every couple days or so is one of my favorite things to do, but we don't sell the flowers, so just take that into consideration. However, from what I've observed with lacy phacelia, not only are the stems pretty long, but we get a solid week out of the vase life in general, and I'm sure that could be improved upon with, any sort of technique. It's about the same with cilantro, about a week after cutting in my recollection. I don't know that either one of them is necessarily better than the others. Looking around online, that seems to be the consensus as well for both crops, 1 week to 10 days vase life. I also like that around that time, the rye is flowering too, which makes a lovely filler. So in effect, your cover crop could easily be, easily get value off your cover crop in that way. As your request for more info on perennial trees and canes, etc., I just got confirmation that our next round of fruit trees are on the way. So definitely more info on that over the next, 20 years or so. As I've mentioned, especially as my back has been acting up as of late, I'm really needing to get stuff growing above my head instead of at my feet. So expect taller perennials to become a bigger part of my, content and life going forward. Canes is an interesting one. It's not exactly the same thing, but there's a lot of sorghum production in and around Kentucky that I'd love to explore. It's a big crop within the Amish communities for sorghum molasses. I'd also love to go see some organic sugar cane in action at some point. Bamboo and reeds like Arundodonax for building materials are also up there for things I'm interested in. In a year, I have to cover roughly 750 subjects. So sure, I'll explore whatever it is as it pertains to farming, agriculture, soccer, food, all the relevant stuff. I don't know that I have any specific recommendations for podcasts at this moment, but people feel free to put them in the comment section and then check that out. Otherwise, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Per usual, I hope I've been mildly helpful to all of you. You Patreon members make all of this sharing of information possible for yourselves and for others, so we thank you. Enormous thank you to all of our sponsors who do that as well. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and the team at no-tillgrowers.com. Also shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or the Seed Farmer at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or sign up in the month of March, you get a shout out in the show. So big shout outs today to Haley Enton, Gus Janes? Gus Janes, good one. Tyus Bro. Okay, so these are very, I feel like this, I mean, maybe I'm biased, but this feels like very soccer-y to me. So what I'm picturing here. So this is a group of parents who runs a select program for soccer in, have we gone to New Mexico yet? Let's try New Mexico. They're in New Mexico. And they are running the Select League program, and it's all the ins and outs, kind of an office, kind of a The Office style documentary about all the ins and outs of dealing with parents and referees, and it's great. And then the aliens attack because they haven't done that in a while, so it's yeah, and then everything just rolls on from there. Aliens like soccer too, or they don't like it. It's hard to tell in the language barrier. Anyway, thanks for watching and/or listening. We will see you tomorrow for Friday, for Feedback Friday. So put in your feedback. Bye.